Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you, and that you may live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord. Well, as we seek to understand everything that Paul was communicating to the church, to the people of God so long ago, and everything that these words still say to us, all the different ways these words still preach the gospel to us all these generations later. As we seek to grasp all that, let's come together and pray again. Lord, once again, we just thank you so much for the time that you've given us and the day that you've made. God, you've put breath into our lungs. You've put life into our bodies. You've given us this gift of today. And God, we want to be good stewards of these gifts. Lord, being good stewards of this time means giving our attention to your word right now. So help us to do that, God. We want to glorify you through the way we block out all the other noise of life and give all of our attention to your word. We want to glorify you through the way we set aside all of our pride and humbly come before you and ask you to teach us and to give us wisdom. God, may we make no assumptions about what we know and what we don't know. May we have no boasting about what we know and how much faith we have, but Lord, may we humbly come before you today, eager to be taught by you, to be filled up by you. Break us down, Lord, where we must be, and build us up where we can be, so that we can be refined and reformed to give you the most glory in this world, making best use of the time. In your precious name, Lord Jesus, we pray. Amen. Now, you know that I do not often, as we teach the word here, I do not often take the time to tell you guys stories about my life. So when I do, it's because I've found kind of a living parable somewhere in my biography, some kind of vivid illustration that will illuminate the truth of the text for us and help bring us to understanding. And as we read this section about parents and children, I think I had an opportunity to do that just by telling you a little bit about my dad and what he was like and what our relationship was like. So let me just talk about him for a minute. And I should note that everything you're about to hear is true. It's not exaggerated. It's not embellished. You know, this is not the Lifetime TV movie version of my life. This is just things as they happened. My dad he wasn't a violent guy, working class, blue collar kind of guy for sure, but not a violent guy by any means. But that doesn't mean that he was a peaceful guy either. He was still given to outbursts and frustration and was not slow to anger. So when things upset him, it was very obvious. And many times, the thing that upset him and pushed him over the edge, that was me. So first, a lot of times, would come the stuff you'd expect. You know, just angry yelling and that immature kind of lashing out, you know, insulting. You're stupid, and you're lazy, and you're this, and you're that, and, you know, whatever. And you'd sort of expect that. But what would come after, and what would last for hours, would be these long-winded lectures. I mean, if you think my sermons are long. So imagine being forced to sit there while for like 3-4 hours, someone just walks you through all the ways that you have failed them over and over and over again. And I mean, I said for hours, but sometimes this would go on for days, right? Because he'd finish lecture number 1, but all the stuff that bothered him would still be in his head. So anytime he's reminded of the things that bother him, well, here comes lecture number 2. You know, so for days you're sort of walking on eggshells because it's like, I don't want to give him that reminder and be stuck in this thing again. But you know, sometimes he just had to look at me and boom, you know, we were right back into it. And that was his baseline. You know, that's the typical response to kind of the everyday frustrations of life. But sometimes, you know, a special sort of frustration comes along. I recently saw a little saying about parenthood that just when you think you're at your last straw, the laster straw comes along. And well, when that would happen to my dad, let's say with a parent-teacher conference, which those never went well, because why else? You know, nobody calls a parent-teacher conference for a good reason, or maybe a bad report card or something. Well, that's when he would get really upset, and then he'd find more weapons to use. So then would come threats. Threats like, I'm just going to send you away. You're just going to be shipped off to military school. Which the only thing that really made me not afraid of that was that I knew he couldn't afford it. Or threats to just pull me out of school altogether. To say, well, if you don't want to be there, then I'll just pull you out of school and doom you to this life where the highest thing you can aspire to is like working at McDonald's. You know, you're going to be a nobody. And then sometimes he'd grab onto this weapon of humiliation, and he'd make use of that. I can still remember him sending me into his bathroom and having me stand in front of the mirror and making me tell myself that I'm an idiot and that I'm stupid and that I don't do things right and all that, because he was really trying to make a point. And that's when he was mad. But you know, when he wasn't mad, he was still, as many dads are, pretty overbearing. You know, there's sort of a joke about dads, the way they are when they have their son hold the flashlight for them, right? It's always got to be in the exact right place, and they're always kind of fine-tuning, no, son, a little bit more this way, a little bit, you got to hold it steady, you got to do it this way, you got to do it that way. It's like, okay, well, imagine a dad who's just like that all the time, who always has something to say about every single thing. And imagine growing up thinking that there really is nothing that you can do right, and you never even really have the right intentions, you never have the right motivations, you never want the right things. You're never even like using your time correctly. And as an adult, stuff like that got even worse. As we got older, he went from being just kind of overbearing to antagonistic. And that means that like when something bad would happen to me, you know, he would laugh. He was kind of an enemy in my life. Laugh, he'd belittle me, you know. I did FM radio for a while. And I took this job up in Ventura, thinking that I would love it because I had basically like gotten myself a promotion by taking that job. And now I was going to run my own radio stations, and it was for a big company. So I thought, you know, like they've got stations in LA and New York. So if I do well here, this is kind of my ticket to the big time. You know, if I can shine here, they'll send me wherever I want to go. And I remember telling him that, and him taking that ambition and instead of nurturing it or cheering it on, just kind of rolling his eyes like he's waiting for me to fail. And then when that job in Ventura didn't work out, and I didn't really like living there, and I didn't really like the company, you know, he took that ambition and he kind of threw it back in my face to embarrass me. Imagine, you know, going to your dad and saying, hey, there's this new thing that I want to try, or I'm growing myself. I'm going to branch out and try something I've not tried before. And instead of them being supportive, they just sort of take that and use it to cut you down. Oh, you really think you can do that? Oh, you really think that's a good idea? Wow, what are you thinking? Don't even bother. And then when I did accomplish something, well, it's like he was always sort of standing by waiting for his share of the credit, his share of the victory. I still remember the night that I got my bachelor's degree. I walked in graduation up at Azusa and got back to my apartment in Hemet that night. And it's late. It's like 11 at night. And he calls me up and he's yelling and being so argumentative because he felt like I didn't give him enough credit. and I didn't give him enough recognition for me getting my bachelor's. The bachelor's that I had to go away and join the army to afford. The bachelor's that he played no part in helping with. And worse than that, he felt like I didn't give his girlfriend enough credit for me going to a Christian college because in his mind, she was some kind of positive Christian influence in my life, which was a total farce. But in any case, he was always sort of there waiting for his share of the credit, and when he didn't get it or he felt like he didn't get enough recognition, it didn't go well for anybody. And when I actually did learn things, and I tried to talk to him about things I knew, he always had to know more. He would just kind of roll his eyes if I ever spoke with authority on something, because he was a bigger authority, no matter what it was, even, theology, right? He was a Lutheran for 5 years when he was a kid, so somehow he always knew more about the Bible than I did, even though he hadn't read it in 50 years. So you take a relationship like that and across time, what do you think happens? Well, you sort of grow apart. And we would go weeks. By the time I was growing up, we'd go weeks, sometimes months, without talking to each other. It's like, okay, I saw you at Christmas, and then the next time I see him, it's 4th of July. And even with all that time that passes, when we finally saw each other again, it's like we had nothing to talk about because we were so different and we weren't really that interested in each other. The truth is, when he passed away, which was 5 or 6 years ago now, the truth is, when he passed away, I can't say for sure that he loved me. And I don't say that to make you go oh, poor guy. And I don't want you to say, no, I'm sure he did, because it's not obvious that he did, and we don't have to tell ourselves lies about that. That's just how things work. So I don't share all that with you to make you build any kind of sympathy for me. I share that with you because I think it presents us with a vivid picture of precisely the kind of stuff that Paul is here warning Christian parents not to do to their children. When he says in verse 4, parents, do not provoke your children to anger. Because we think we know what anger is, it's that sort of immediate, short-term, white-hot frustration, but that's not the kind of thing that Paul has in mind when he says anger. I think everyone knows a parent is occasionally going to frustrate their children, and that's not what he's warning parents against. He uses this word, provoke to anger, as we translate it in English. In Greek, is just one word, and it's this word paragizo. And Paul's not saying, don't ever do something that'll make your child upset. Paul's saying, don't exasperate your children. Don't take their frustrations, their little disagreements with you, their occasional anger towards you. Don't take that and purposefully make it worse. Don't purposefully and perpetually frustrate your kids. Don't try to make them angry with you. Don't annoy them. Don't enrage them on purpose. Sometimes your love for your children compels you to go against their will, to say no to the thing that they want to say yes to, and that they want you to say yes to correct them, even if they think they've gotten something right. Your love for your kids compels you to do that, and that's going to cause some natural frustration. You will butt heads and grind against each other a little bit. That's going to happen. But you shouldn't seek to butt heads with your kids. You shouldn't seek to become a source of frustration in their lives, to become a source of bitterness and a source of anger and discouragement in their lives. And that's what my dad did to me. That's what the illustration of those stories was. A man who made himself an ongoing, constant source of frustration in the life of his son. That was a big part of the reason why, before I even graduated high school, I was in an Army recruiter's office signing my papers, because I needed to get away from that house, and I needed to get away from him, and I wanted to go to college. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any means to get out of town. And there was the Army saying, hey, come be one of us. That's why we drifted apart in the years that followed. You want to know what it looks like? You want to know what the end result is when a parent exasperates their children? It's a father and son who are grown up, but when they come together, it's not joyful. There's no real embrace. And when they talk to each other, they talk to each other like strangers who are just sort of stuck in an elevator together. Because that's what it feels like. You're stuck in that room together, not because you want to be, but because it's Thanksgiving, and that's just what you have to do. Imagine sitting next to your parent, who you probably love or loved if they've passed away. Imagine sitting next to them, and the only thing that you can think to talk about with them is the weather or traffic. What a miserable conversation to have with a parent. Do you think anybody wants to talk to you about the weather? They don't. You think anybody wants to hear about traffic you were stuck in? They don't. They don't like being in traffic either. Why would they want to hear about the traffic you were in? Those stories are it's like negative conversation. It's not just the absence of substance. It takes substance away. So yeah, don't talk about traffic to me or anyone else. But imagine sitting with your parent, the one who is supposed to have this meaningful relationship with you until they pass on, who's always supposed to be there as like a source of wisdom and guidance and encouragement, and that's the only thing you can think to talk about. You probably have better conversations with strangers than you do with that kind of parent. That's what the end result of this antagonistic kind of relationship looks like. And if you're hearing that and you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's where I'm at with my son, that's where I'm at with my daughter, okay, well, then I hope that's a wake-up call for you. Maybe it's time to examine the role that you're playing in their life and to ask yourself if that's really what you want. Now, you might hear that and think, okay, well, what role then does discipline play in my relationship to my children if I'm supposed to be so cautious about angering them and exasperating them? Paul would never say to a parent, "Thou shalt not discipline your children." Okay, this is a guy who knew and revered the Old Testament scriptures, who knew the Word of God backwards and forwards, and he dedicated so much of his life to studying it. So I'm certain that the same guy who wrote, "Don't provoke your children to anger," wrote that knowing like how many times in the book of Proverbs we are told to discipline our children. I mean, here's just a few quick examples. These are not even all of them, by the way, but Proverbs 13, verse 24, "Whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him." Proverbs 23:13, "Do not withhold discipline from a child." Proverbs 29:17, "Discipline your son, he will give you rest." So Paul knows discipline is not just like an encouraged part of the parent-child relationship. It's a necessary part. We owe our children discipline. Paul's not calling for an abandonment of discipline, for the absence of discipline. What these scriptures call us to is right discipline, faithful discipline. He tells us what the motivation behind our discipline of our children is supposed to be. He tells us what the aim, the goal of our discipline is supposed to be as the regenerated, reborn people of God. How do we discipline our children for the glory of God? How do we discipline our children and at the same time show them the self-sacrificial love of Jesus? The motivation for discipline will kind of mean everything in this conversation. Paul tells us that we are to be motivated by a desire to build them up. That was his instruction. Build them up. Those were the action words that he used. Build them up. He told us what the end result of being antagonizing toward our children would be in the book of Colossians, which we've studied in Colossians chapter 3 at verse 21. Where he used the same language. He said, "Don't provoke your children to anger, lest they be discouraged or disheartened." Don't antagonize your children, lest they lose the excitement and the enthusiasm to meet the challenges of life. Don't antagonize them. Don't exasperate them, because by doing so, you will wear them down. And you have not been made a mom or a dad to wear down your children. You've been made a mom or a dad to build them up. If you were to think of yourself like a sculptor, and your children are the marble, and you're supposed to chisel a more refined image out of this marble, the ideal of what your son or your daughter ought to become. Don't think of discipline as taking your hammer and chisel and constantly chipping things away and filing them down, shrinking them down until they have the image that you're looking for. Discipline shouldn't chisel them down to nothing. Discipline should add more marble to the sculpture so that it's bigger and stronger than it was before. To build them up is the opposite of breaking them down. And that's what we've been called to as moms and dads with our discipline, to build them up. Literally, to translate the Greek, literally, Paul says, nourish your children with the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Nourish them as if it is food that they need for growth, as as if it is food that they need for strengthening. Because that's the goal of us disciplining our kids, is to strengthen them, to add to their capacity, to add to their ability and their understanding. Strengthen them, Paul says, with discipline and instruction. Every parent is sort of caught up in the same story or faces the same challenge with their kids, that you get them for a limited amount of time, and there's going to come a day, and for some it comes sooner than others, but there's going to come a day where you have to send them out into the wilderness. Not the literal wilderness, but you have to release them from your sheltering and your discipline and your care. And they're going to have to go into the wilderness of life and navigate it on their own strength. They are going to enter the good fight with their own strength. They are going to have to be released to run the race with their own 2 feet. Discipline and instruction ought to be to strengthen our children so that they are ready to run that race well, so that they can enter the good fight and actually be useful in fighting it. When we discipline our kids, the goal is to make them more ready to go and face the trials and the challenges and the tribulations and the persecutions of life that will lie ahead of them. When you look at your son and you look at your daughter, you got to remember that. This is someone who's going to enter the world and who is going to be ravaged by it. People will hurt them. People will lie to them. People will do injustice to them. They will be cheated. They will be assaulted. They will be beaten up. They will find themselves at the end of their rope. Look at them and know that. And remember that the next time you have to take them aside and discipline them and give them some correction. In that moment, you are preparing them for those days. You are preparing them to navigate the wilderness without you as their guide. You are preparing them for the day that their boss comes in and says, "You're done. Layoff time. You got to go." And they don't know how they're going to figure out their household budget now. You're preparing them for the day that their husband or their wife has to confess something terrible to them. You're preparing them for the day that they're in a doctor's office and the physician comes in and says, the news is not good. Your discipline, your correction is strengthening them for those days when they are tempted by anger and sadness and fear and all of the things that can knock them off of rejoicing and worship and faithfulness. And you are either going to help make them strong enough to stand fast on that day, or you are going to help them get knocked away from faithfulness. You are either going to build them up, or you are going to wear them out. You are training them to live faithfully to the Lord in those moments that they will have. Discipline is correction. It is correction designed and intended to serve the good of the one receiving it. You know, the mistake that my dad made so many times was he took discipline, and I needed it. A lot of times I needed it. I was one of those latchkey kids who just had the freedom to do whatever I wanted for most of the day, and often chose to spend my time doing things that weren't useful or productive. Okay, there's a reason why bad report cards showed up to my house, and it's because I thought middle school was a joke, and I didn't want to be there. And it kind of is a joke. But you don't have to. Well, there's too many young people in here for me to actually say that. So, anyway, stay in school. I needed discipline. What I didn't need, though, was someone who took discipline and used it as an outlet to inflict pain to satisfy his own anger and his own frustration. Discipline is not our opportunity to blow off steam at our children, even though maybe they deserve it. Because that doesn't serve anyone's good. It doesn't even really serve yours. Discipline is not for your good, it's for theirs. Okay, you aren't a good disciplinarian just because you're the kind of guy who flies off the handle all the time. That doesn't make you like a good, strong, strict disciplinarian. That makes you immature. That makes you undisciplined because you can't even control your own anger. Humiliating or embarrassing or cutting down your children just for the sake of it, just because you think maybe they deserve it, and calling that discipline, that doesn't make you a good disciplinarian. That makes you a fool. Because you're not building up anyone. You're not helping anyone. Instead of building up, you're breaking down. So parents, if we're going to offer right discipline, we have to be disciplined ourselves. Because the goal is not to provoke our children to anger. So we have to grow the capacity. We have to be sanctified to take our own anger and set it aside and resist the temptation to use that as our motivation for discipline. Because that's not right discipline. That's just punishment for the sake of punishment. And that doesn't help anybody. Before we can give right discipline to our children, we have to have enough discipline to embrace this goal of doing it for their good. Discipline is just training. And training's got a positive side and it's got a negative side. You know, the negative side is correction. It's correcting bad behavior. It's correcting misunderstanding. No, you shouldn't hit your sister. That's not okay. No, you shouldn't go and break another kid's toy block tower, whatever. That's not okay. No, you shouldn't insult your teacher in the middle of class and tell her school's a joke. That's not okay. We have to be able to correct stuff like that, but training has a good side too. Remember, you're building them up towards the ideal. So when you see some sign of it, when they actually get something right, well, part of discipline is recognizing that too. You have to be disciplined enough to see when they've gotten something right instead of just assuming that they get it wrong all the time. You know, the active verb here was to nourish them, and nothing, probably nothing nourishes our children more than when we, as mom or dad, notice that they've gotten something right. That when they've done something well, and we come alongside them and we cheer them on towards the ideal. We say, man, that was exactly the right word to use. Man, you did exactly the right thing without anybody asking you to. You used your time in the right way. That was perfect. You know, good job, keep it up. I mean, what will nourish our children more than that? I mean, when you were a child, what did you want more than that? And if we're going to do that, well, we have to be disciplined enough to pay attention to them and to listen to them, to really watch the things they do and zero in to the things they say so we can recognize when they get things right. And I say we have to be disciplined enough because, the more I see, the more it becomes obvious. There's a lot of undisciplined parents who don't have the discipline to just pay attention to what their kids are up to. I wondered for a while, why does it bother me so much when I'm out and about in a restaurant, let's say, because that's the most frequent time I see this, and a family's at a table and they've got their kid's face buried in a screen so that they can bury their face in a screen too. So that they don't have to talk to each other and they don't have to listen to each other. I see it at the park. So many moms and dads who want to be preoccupied with, solitaire or Instagram or whatever, and their kids are completely out of view, and they're only like 10 feet away. And I know, I've got a 3 and a 2, okay, who are about to be a 4 and a 3. I know parenthood can be exhausting. I'm exhausted. It can be exhausting. But discipline is what allows us to resist that selfish impulse that we have to say, I'm too tired, I'm worn out, I'm at the end of my capacity today, I've just put up with too much to pay attention for another minute. Discipline is what allows us to set aside those selfish impulses, push past them, and continue to embrace giving attention to our children. It's what allows us to, even after a long day of arguing and negotiating through their behavior, to still sit at table with them and look at them and say, what are you thinking about? Tell me about your day. What do you want to do tomorrow? It's what allows us to resist that temptation to watch them go to the playground and say, well, they're preoccupied, they're okay. Here's my opportunity to go on my phone or read my book or whatever. Discipline allows us to push past that, get off the bench, and go play with them. So that we can tell them, good job. So that we can tell them, keep it up. So that we can tell them, you're fun to be with. Discipline is what allows us to push past a lot of our selfish impulses, to just turn off our attention and focus on ourselves for a minute, to push past that and still see and hear our children. And it's what gives us those opportunities to tell them, you've gotten something right, or we need to talk about how you got this thing wrong. And you might hear that and say, you might hear that and think maybe I'm naive, or I don't get it, or I don't understand your struggle or what you're going through. And you're probably right. I don't understand every detail of your life as mom or dad. Okay, you might be more exhausted than I am, and there might be more demands on your time than there are on mine. I give you that, okay? But that doesn't mean we're allowed to embrace those excuses, because we've been given something. We've been given something that equips us and empowers us for this task. How do we live faithfully as mom or dad and live up to the heights of what the Scriptures have called us to? Well, I'll take you back to Ephesians 5:18 and Ephesians 5:21. These two verses hang over all of these commands and calls to submit and to use our authority faithfully. In verse 18, Paul said, being filled with the Spirit. So you're not doing this on your own strength. You're doing this as one who is filled with the Holy Spirit, with God Himself dwelling in you. He's the one calling you to faithfulness and dragging you behind Him. And then verse 21, where Paul said, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Which completely alters our intentions and our motivations, doesn't it? Because Because now in those moments where it's like, I'm too tired to serve the good of someone else, it's like, well, we don't get to have that excuse, because our aim is not just to please another person, it's to do this out of reverence for Christ. We are to love Jesus so much that we do not fail to rejoice in living faithfully as we ought to, in glorifying Him and embodying this call to be His temple and to shine as His lights and be His set-apart people in the world, in these relationships, in the way that we parent our kids, in the way that we sacrifice ourselves for our wives or submit to our husbands. The goal is always to do this with reverence for Christ, not just with affection for one another, because that comes with limitations, right? But to do this with reverence for Christ. He's the one we are to be looking to when we get to the end of our rope, and when that last straw has finally been pulled and broken, we turn to Him and we say, Lord, I rejoice in doing this for You. You know, Jeremiah has corrected me. I have really learned to lower my voice as his dad and Isabella's dad. He caught me in the middle of an episode, let's say, one day, and reminded me, don't use angry words, use kind words. And why did I have to teach him that? But you know, ever since he said that to me, it's like, he's right. And who do I look to as I work on that? Who am I looking to please as I really actively try to remember that, kind of no matter what he's done to me or to our house or whatever? Well, I'm looking towards Christ. I'm looking towards the Lord of my whole life. Yeah, I do need to use more kind words. I do need to set aside my anger and have discipline to control it, not just because that's what a good dad would do, but because Christ is king over my relationship with my kids. Christ is king over how I parent them and discipline them. You know, I said Paul tells us the motivation behind our discipline and the goal of our discipline. The motivation behind it was to nourish our children, to build them up, not break them down. Well, the goal of it is to build up our children in the instruction of the Lord. To build them up in the Lord. You are owed obedience from your children. Okay, that's Paul's words to the kids. That's obvious. You are owed their obedience. But we are not allowed to make available to ourselves an arsenal of weapons to draw it out of them. Verbal and rhetorical and mental weapons to beat it out of them. Because that's not the goal of our discipline. Because that doesn't serve the end goal of what we're really trying to do here. You're here to bear witness to your children of the life-giving, life-saving power of the gospel of grace. You're here to make it obvious to your children that there's a real difference between a person who has been reborn by the power of Jesus' death and resurrection and the way that a regenerated person of God navigates through the challenges of life and deals with anger and frustration. There's a real difference between that and the way the world deals with those things. It should be obvious to your kids. My mom or my dad, they don't just say they believe in Christ. They are living it out. It should be obvious to them through the way you parent them. Because the way you parent them will be different from the way their friends' parents parent them. It should be obvious, even in the way we discipline them, that we have a higher goal in mind than just lashing out. That our goal is not to wear them down, but to build them up with the gospel. As the worship team rejoins us, that's the reminder that we'll close on. What matters most in the training of our children is not that we satisfy our anger, is not that we even set up a good life for our kids. You are not disciplining your kids so that they get a good job and so that they're set up for happiness, so that they can go and achieve material success. You are training up your children so that they will know the life-saving, life-changing power of God, the true and living God. You're training up your children so that they'll see what the joy of worshiping God with all of life looks like and feels like. Our kids should go to bed thanking God that mom and dad belong to Him, because we're training them up for something that matters. And maybe your kids are grown up and you're like, gosh, I needed this reminder 30 years ago. But don't think that way, because this remains true no matter how old your kids are. That's still your role in their life as mom, as dad. That's still your responsibility. It doesn't shrink as your kids grow up. You're still here to bear witness about the truth of this gospel through the way you love them and through the way you teach them. So don't give up. Even if your kids are 40, 50 years old, don't give up. Never give up.
Sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. Live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one that could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. Will build my life upon alone. There is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken.
It's one of those messages that we've gotten to the end to, and now you're sitting there and you're thinking, "Whew, I got to make some changes after this one." You're right, maybe you do. But don't let the change that you make just be in the content of what you do as mom or dad. The first and most meaningful change that we probably have to make is why we do what we are going to do as mom or dad. Because we might be parenting with the goal of raising a child who will satisfy our desires, or who will meet the ideals of what we think a good boy or a good girl ought to be and what a good life will look like. But we've just learned that the motivation behind our parenting is to do this by the leading and empowering of God's Spirit out of reverence for God's Son. We do this because it is an act of praise, and it is an opportunity to show the life-saving power of this gospel. And maybe that's the change we have to make, to replace the motivation behind our parenting, get rid of whatever it has been, and put in that spot instead reverence for Christ and love for this gospel. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he lift his countenance on you and give you peace until we're together